Known throughout the underworld as a man with ice in his veins, Adrian Russo routinely dismissed stunning supermodels and mafia heiresses without a second glance. That ice finally cracked, however, the night an exhausted, heavy-set waitress breached his heavily guarded skyscraper, holding the one thing he would kill for. The torrential November rain turned the streets of New York City into mirrors reflecting neon lies. Inside the VIP lounge of the Obsidian Club, the atmosphere was thick with cigar smoke and unsaid threats. Adrian Russo sat at the head of the leather booth, his expression carved from stone. At 32, he was the undisputed capo of the Russo family, commanding an empire of shipping logistics, underground casinos, and blood money. I was also notoriously, unnervingly solitary. "Adrian, darling," purred Cassandra Carmichael, the willowy daughter of a Boston mob boss. She slid closer, her diamond-clad fingers reaching for his lapel. She was flawless, a size 0 socialite bred specifically to merge crime families through marriage. "My father thinks it's time our families united, and I think it's time you stopped sleeping in that penthouse all alone." Adrian didn't even look at her. He caught her wrist mid-air, his grip just tight enough to make her gasp. "Tell your father," Adrian said, his voice a low, lethal rumble, "that Russo Enterprises doesn't need Boston, and tell yourself that I don't need a porcelain doll who breaks when the wind blows." He dropped her hand. "Get out." Cassandra's face flushed with humiliated fury. She stormed out, joining the long list of beautiful, ambitious women who had tried and failed to warm the coldest boss in the 5 boroughs. Adrian wasn't interested in games. I was interested in survival. 10 minutes later, as Adrian exited the club through the private back alley to reach his armored SUV, the shadows moved. It was a calculated ambush, 4 men wearing dark masks, armed with suppressed pistols. "Russo!" one hissed. What followed was 20 seconds of pure, brutal violence. Adrian wasn't just a boss who gave orders. He had fought his way up from the streets. He disarmed the first man, shattering his jaw, and used him as a human shield against the second. His underboss, Enzo Bianchi, emerged from the car, guns blazing. The remaining attackers scattered into the rain-soaked labyrinth of the city. Adrian stood over the groaning attacker, his knuckles bleeding. He adjusted his bespoke suit, breathing heavily. "Clean this up, Enzo," he ordered, climbing into the SUV. It wasn't until the vehicle crossed the Brooklyn Bridge that Adrian looked down at his right hand. The blood drained from his face. His ring was gone. It wasn't just jewelry. It was a heavy, custom-forged platinum band set with a rare, raw black diamond engraved with the Russo family crest. It had belonged to his grandfather, a man who built the syndicate from nothing. In the underworld, that ring was a seal of absolute authority. Without it, whispers of weakness would spread. In his world, weakness meant death. "Turn the car around," Adrian commanded, his voice suddenly desperate. "Now." 3 blocks away from the Obsidian Club, Beatrice Gallagher was just trying to survive the night. Beatrice, B to the few friends she had, pushed her way out of the service doors of Sullivan's Diner. At 28, Baer was intimately familiar with exhaustion. She was a distinctly fat woman, possessing thick thighs, a soft, round stomach, and generous curves that her worn, oversized trench coat struggled to contain. Society had taught B to make herself invisible. She was used to the backhanded compliments, the invisible barriers in job interviews, and the absolute lack of attention from men who chased conventional perfection. But Bea was fiercely independent. She worked 50 hours a week, serving late-night drunks, just to keep her grandmother in a decent assisted living facility in Queens. The rain plastered her dark curls to her face as she hurried toward the subway grate. She took a shortcut through a narrow alleyway behind an upscale nightclub. The ground was littered with trash and shattered glass. Suddenly, the heel of her worn boot caught on something hard. Bea stumbled, bracing herself against the damp brick wall to keep from falling into a puddle. "Damn it," she muttered, bending down to check her sole. That was when she saw it. Glinting faintly under the glow of a flickering street lamp was a heavy piece of metal. Bea reached into the muddy puddle and pulled it out. She wiped it on the edge of her coat. Her breath hitched. It was a ring, incredibly heavy, dominated by a rough-cut black stone that seemed to swallow the light. Even to an untrained eye, the platinum band was worth a small fortune. She squinted, tracing the intricate engraving on the inside. Dr. Omerta. Bea's heart pounded. A pawn shop in the Diamond District would give her enough cash for this to pay her grandmother's medical bills for a year, maybe even clear her own credit card debt. She held it in her palm, feeling its cold, undeniable weight. She thought about her empty fridge. She thought about the eviction warning she had received last Tuesday. But as she stared at the crest, her conscience flared. It's an heirloom, she thought. Someone is tearing their hair out looking for this. I know what it feels like to lose the only thing you have left of your family. She remembered the screech of tires and the commotion she had heard from this alley just an hour ago while taking out the diner's trash. The ring belonged to someone who had been at the club. Sighing deeply, Bea slipped the ring into her deepest coat pocket. "You're an idiot, Bea," she whispered to herself. But she made a decision. She wasn't a thief. Tomorrow, she would find out who owned the Obsidian Club and give it back. By 9:00 a.m. the next morning, the top floor of the Russo Enterprises Tower in Manhattan was a war zone. Adrian stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring at the sprawling city below, his eyes dark with sleepless rage. Enzo Bianchi stood behind him, looking tense. "We tore the alley apart, Dom. We interrogated the sanitation workers. We even shook down Joey the Rat Marino and the local pawn shops. Nothing. It's in the wind. The Lupatazzi family is already whispering that you were stripped of your crown." Adrian turned, his face a mask of terrifying calm. "Find it, Enzo. If I have to gut every thief in Manhattan, I want my grandfather's ring back by midnight." Down in the lobby of the skyscraper, a very different battle was taking place. Basil Gormby stood in front of the sweeping marble security desk, clutching her damp canvas tote bag. She had traded her diner uniform for her best outfit, a modest navy wrap dress that clung softly to her full hips, and a beige cardigan. She felt entirely out of place among the sleek, tailored executives and the hulking, muscular security guards patrolling the floor. She had Googled the owner of the Obsidian Club and traced the LLC back to Russo Enterprises. "Ma'am," for the 4th time, sighed the head of security, a mountain of a man with an earpiece, glaring down at her. "Mr. Russo does not take walk-in appointments. Now I suggest you leave before I have you escorted out." And for the 4th time, Bea said, planting her feet. She was fat, not fragile, and years of dealing with unruly diner patrons had given her a spine of steel. I have something that belongs to him. Something very important. I'm not leaving this lobby, and I am certainly not giving it to a stranger to hand over. Lady, you're testing my patience, the guard growled, reaching out to grip her upper arm. Don't touch me, Bee snapped, jerking her arm back. The elevator doors behind the desk chimed. A hush fell over the lobby as a phalanx of men in tailored suits stepped out. At the center of them was a man who seemed to suck the oxygen right out of the room. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with raven black hair and striking, cold gray eyes. A faint scar cut through his left eyebrow, adding a rugged brutality to his incredibly handsome face. It was Adrian Russo. I was heading for the front doors, flanked by Enzo, when the commotion at the desk caught his eye. He stopped, his cold gaze locked onto Bee. In a world populated by surgically enhanced socialites and starving models, Bear was an anomaly. She was soft where they were sharp, undeniably heavy, with a flush of nervous color on her cheeks. But what caught Adrian's attention wasn't just her size. It was the fierce, defiant way she was glaring at his head of security. "What is the problem here?" Adrian's voice boomed across the marble floor. The security guard paled. "Mr. Russo, apologies. This woman is refusing to leave. She claims she has something for you." Adrian stepped closer, his imposing frame looming over Bee. Most people shrank under his gaze. Bee swallowed hard, her heart doing a frantic tap dance against her ribs, but she met his eyes squarely. "You're Adrian Russo?" she asked, her voice surprisingly steady. "I am," Adrian said slowly, his eyes raking over her face, noting the dark circles of exhaustion beneath her bright hazel eyes. "And who are you?" "Beatrice Gallagher," she said. She reached into her canvas bag. Instantly, 3 of Adrian's guards reached for their concealed weapons. "Stand down," Adrian barked, never taking his eyes off Bea. Bea pulled her hand out and held it flat between them. Slowly, she uncurled her fingers. Resting in the center of her pale, soft palm was the heavy platinum band, the black diamond catching the lobby lights. The silence that descended upon the lobby was absolute. Enzo let out a choked gasp. Adrian stared at the ring, and then, very slowly, he looked back up at Bea. For the first time in 10 years, the capo of the Russo family was genuinely shocked. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "In a puddle in an alleyway off 4th Street, behind a nightclub," Bea said simply. "I figured someone lost it in a scuffle. The engraving inside matches your initials." Adrian reached out. As his large, calloused fingers brushed against hers to take the ring, a strange electric jolt shot up Bea's arm. Adrian felt it too. His hand paused for a fraction of a second. He slipped the ring back onto his right hand. The weight of his empire settled back into place. "Do you have any idea what this is worth?" Adrian asked, his grey eyes narrowing intensely. "Any pawn shop in this city would have given you 50 grand for the stone alone, no questions asked. You look like you could use the money." It was a blunt assessment, borderline insulting. Bea's spine stiffened. "I'm poor, Mr. Russo. I'm not a thief," she said sharply. "It clearly looked like a family heirloom. I lost my parents a few years ago. If I lost the only thing I had left of them, I'd want someone to bring it back to me. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a shift at the diner in an hour." She turned on her heel, her cardigan swishing around her hips, and began to walk toward the revolving doors. Adrian was paralyzed for a moment. Women threw themselves at his feet for a fraction of his attention. They plotted, schemed, and manipulated. Yet here was a woman, soft and curved, unapologetically taking up space in his world, who handed him his most prized possession and walked away without asking for a dime. Beatrice Gallagher. "Wait," Adrian commanded. Bea didn't stop. She pushed the revolving door. But as she stepped out onto the busy sidewalk, a sleek silver sedan that had been idling across the street suddenly screeched forward. The tinted window rolled down. Enzo, looking through the lobby glass, yelled, "Dom, it's the Lupatazzi crew. They're watching the building." Adrian moved faster than lightning. He sprinted through the revolving door just as the barrel of a gun emerged from the sedan's window. The target wasn't Adrian. The men in the car had been watching the lobby. They had seen a woman hand. Adrian Russo, an object that made his guards stand down. In the paranoid logic of the mob, Bear had just become an unknown asset, a courier, an informant, or a weakness. "Get down!" Adrian roared. Before Bear could register the sound of screeching tires, a massive weight slammed into her. Adrian tackled her to the concrete, just as 3 muffled pops echoed through the street. Bullets shattered the glass of the revolving door, right where she had been standing. Adrian shielded her completely with his body. He was heavy, smelling of expensive cologne and gunpowder. Bea squeezed her eyes shut, paralyzed by terror, as Enzo and the Russo guards flooded the street, returning fire until the sedan sped away into the traffic. Adrian slowly pushed himself up on his forearms, looking down at Bear. She was trembling, her chest heaving beneath him. "Are you hit?" he demanded, his hands roughly but frantically checking her shoulders and arms. No, Bear stammered, tears of shock pricking her eyes. What was that?" Adrian stood up, effortlessly pulling her to her feet. The coldness in his eyes had returned, but now it was directed entirely at the street where the car had disappeared. He looked back at Bea, realizing the gravity of what had just happened. By doing the right thing, this innocent, beautiful woman had just stepped into a war zone. "They saw you with me," Adrian said grimly, his jaw tight. "They think you're working for me now, which means they'll hunt you down." "What? No, I'm just a waitress," Bea panicked, trying to pull her arm away. "I have to go home." "You can't go home, Beatrice," Adrian said, his grip firming on her arm, not letting her go. He looked at her, his obsession cementing in that very moment. He wasn't going to let anything happen to her. "You belong to my world now, and you're coming with me." The armored Mercedes Maybach S680 tore through the streets of Manhattan, blowing past red lights as 3 black SUVs flanked it in a tight, impenetrable convoy. Inside the cavernous, soundproof cabin, the silence was deafening, broken only by Bea's ragged breathing. She was pressed into the plush leather of the far corner, her arms wrapped defensively around her generous curves. She stared at the man sitting opposite her. Adrian Russo had stripped off his suit jacket, revealing a tailored dress shirt that strained against his broad chest. He was on a burner phone, barking orders with terrifying efficiency. "I want eyes on Carmine Lupertazzi's social clubs in Little Italy. Lock down the docks. If they want a war over a misunderstanding, we give them a slaughter," Adrian commanded, his voice cold enough to freeze water. He snapped the phone shut and finally looked at Bea. "I am not going with you," Bea said, her voice shaking but her chin stubbornly raised. You can drop me off at the next subway station. I won't say a word. I just want to go back to my life." Adrian let out a harsh, humorless breath. "Your life as you knew it ended the second you picked up that ring, Beatrice. The Lupatazzi family doesn't do misunderstandings. They saw my men lower their weapons for you. They saw me take a bullet for you. In their eyes, you are my weakness. If I let you walk into the subway, you'll be dead before the train reaches Brooklyn." "But my grandmother!" Bea shouted, desperation finally cracking her composure. "She has severe dementia. She's at Sunrise Senior Living on Queens Boulevard. If I don't show up to pay her facility fee on Friday, they'll put her in state care. I am all she has." Adrian held her gaze. He tapped the glass partition dividing them from the driver. "Enzo," he called out to his underboss in the front seat. "Call the director of Sunrise Senior Living in Queens. Tell them Beatrice Gallagher's grandmother is being transferred. I want her moved to the private VIP wing at Mount Sinai Hospital within the hour. Secure the floor. Put 2 of our best men on her door. Send the bill to my personal accountant." Bea stared at him, completely stunned. You can't just do that." "I just did," Adrian replied softly. For the first time, the hard lines around his mouth relaxed into something resembling reassurance. "No one you love will be touched, Beatrice. You have my word." 45 minutes later, the convoy passed through the imposing iron gates of a sprawling, fortress-like estate in Alpine, New Jersey, one of the wealthiest and most secure zip codes in America. The mansion was a masterpiece of modern architecture, all stone, steel, and bulletproof glass, surrounded by acres of dense, heavily patrolled woods. For the next 3 days, Bea was a prisoner in a gilded cage. She was given a massive guest suite overlooking the Palisades, but she refused to be compliant. When a team of personal shoppers arrived from Bergdorf Goodman, carrying racks of size 0 and size 2 designer gowns, Bea sent them packing. Adrian found her sitting on the edge of her California king bed that evening, wearing the same modest navy wrap dress she had arrived in, looking exhausted but defiant. "They told me you threw $1,000 Loro Piana cashmere sweater at a stylist's head," Adrian said, leaning against the doorframe, a rare smirk playing on his lips. "They brought clothes for a stick insect," Bea snapped, standing up. She gestured to her wide hips and full stomach. "I am a size 18, Mr. Russo. I am fat. I have always been fat, and I am not apologizing for it. I am not one of your mafia princesses who starves herself for a diamond bracelet. If you are going to keep me hostage, the least you can do is let me do my own laundry." Adrian pushed off the doorframe and walked slowly toward her. The air in the room grew instantly. Bea held her ground, even as her heart hammered in her throat. He stopped inches from her. He didn't look at her with the disgust or pity she was so used to seeing from men of his status. His silver-gray eyes swept over her soft, sweeping curves with a dark, consuming hunger that made Bea's breath hitch. "You are exactly what you are meant to be," Adrian murmured, his deep voice vibrating in the quiet room. He reached out, his calloused thumb gently brushing a stray dark curl behind her ear. "Those women starve themselves because they are empty inside. You fought my head of security. You threw a sweater at a stylist. You handed me $1 million diamond and asked for nothing. You are more real than anything I have ever touched." Bea swallowed hard, completely disarmed. Adrian, I'll have a private tailor here tomorrow, he whispered, his eyes dropping to her lips. They will make clothes that fit you perfectly, because you aren't a hostage, Beatrice. You are under my protection. Over the next 2 weeks, the ice around the Mafia boss began to melt. Adrian found himself rearranging his cutthroat schedule just to have dinner with beer. They ate real food, heavily spiced pasta dishes, thick cuts of steak, rich desserts. And they talked. She told him about her grandmother's fading memories. He told her about the brutal, bloody climb to the top of the Russo Empire after his father was murdered. B saw the man beneath the monster. Adrian found the one thing his billions couldn't buy: peace. But in the underworld, peace is just an illusion before a war. The betrayal came from the inside. It was a rainy Tuesday night. Adrian and Bear were in the estate's library. B was reading, curled up in a velvet armchair, in a custom-made emerald green silk robe that draped beautifully over her thick thighs and full chest. Adrian was at his mahogany desk, signing off on shipping manifests, though his eyes rarely left her. Suddenly, the estate's massive alarm system shrieked. The power was cut, plunging the mansion into pitch blackness. "Get down!" Adrian roared, pulling a Glock 19 from his desk drawer. The library doors burst open. Enzo slid into the room, a tactical flashlight cutting through the dark. "Dom, the perimeter is breached. It's a massive hit squad, heavily armed." "Lupatazzi?" Adrian asked, shielding Bea behind his large frame. "Worse," Enzo panted, checking his magazine. "It's the Boston crew. Arthur Carmichael. And a backroom alliance with Carmine Lupatazzi. Carmichael wants your head for humiliating his daughter, Cassandra, at the Obsidian Club. They paid off our gate guards." Adrian's blood ran cold. He had underestimated Carmichael's wounded pride. "We need to get Beatrice to the panic room in the sub-basement. Now!" The three of them moved into the darkened hallway. The mansion echoed with the terrifying sounds of suppressed gunfire and shouting. They moved tactically down the grand staircase, but as they reached the foyer, the front doors were blown open by a localized explosive charge. 4 mercenaries poured in, assault rifles raised. "Move!" Adrian shoved Bear behind a massive marble pillar just as the foyer erupted into a deafening firefight. Enzo took down 2 men before taking a grazing shot to his thigh. Adrian was a force of lethal nature, his aim flawless, dropping the 3rd. But the 4th mercenary aimed his rifle straight at the edge of the pillar, where B's robe was visible. Adrian didn't think. He didn't calculate the risk. He threw himself across the marble floor, taking the mercenary down with 2 shots to the chest, but not before the man's rifle discharged. Adrian let out a grunted gasp, collapsing against the stairs. "Adrian!" Bea screamed, abandoning her cover. She dropped to her knees beside him. His crisp white shirt was rapidly blooming with dark, crimson blood at his upper shoulder. "I'm fine," he choked out, his face pale as he gripped his shoulder. Sirens began to wail in the distance. The local Alpine police, heavily funded by Adrian's shell companies, were finally arriving. The remaining attackers retreated, fleeing into the woods. An hour later, the estate was locked down. The estate's underground medical bay was fully operational. A private trauma surgeon had removed the bullet from Adrian's shoulder and stitched him up. Bea refused to leave his side. She sat on the edge of the sterile cot, her hands trembling as she wiped the cold sweat from his forehead with a damp cloth. She was terrified, but she didn't cry. Adrian looked up at her, heavily medicated, but completely lucid. "You didn't run," he rasped, reaching up with his good arm to grip her waist, pulling her closer. "Where would I go?" Bea whispered, her voice cracking. "You ruined my quiet life, you stubborn, violent man." "Carmichael is dead," Adrian said coldly. "Enzo is tracking him down tonight. Lupatazzi will surrender by morning once he realizes Boston failed. It's over, Beatrice. You're safe." He pulled himself up slightly, wincing, and reached into the pocket of his slacks, resting on the chair beside the bed. He pulled out the heavy platinum ring, his grandfather's legacy, the black diamond that had started it all. "The night you brought this back to me," Adrian said, his grey eyes burning into hers with absolute certainty, "you saved my life, not just from the Lupatazzis. You saved me from spending the rest of my miserable life alone." He took her soft, trembling left hand. "I have rejected every woman in this city because they all wanted the crown, but none of them wanted the man carrying it," Adrian continued, his voice thick with emotion. "You never cared about the crown. You cared about the man." He slid the heavy platinum band onto her ring finger. It was entirely too large, but the weight of it felt like destiny. "Marry me, Beatrice. Rule this city by my side. Let me spend the rest of my life worshipping every single curve of your body and destroying anyone who ever made you feel like you were anything less than a queen." Tears finally spilled over Bea's cheeks. She looked at the blood on his shirt, the cold steel of the medical bay, and the terrifying, beautiful man who had laid down his life for a waitress he had known for less than a month. She didn't belong in this world, but she belonged to him. "Yes," she sobbed, leaning down to press her lips against his in a desperate, bruising kiss. "Yes, Adrian." 1 year later. The charity gala at the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan was the social event of the season. The room was filled with politicians, billionaires, and the hidden power brokers of the underworld. At the head table sat Adrian Russo, his presence as terrifying and commanding as ever. But the ice in his eyes was gone. Beside him sat Beatrice Russo. She was radiant, her full, lush figure draped in a custom-made, ruby-red velvet gown that hugged every curve perfectly. She wore a stunning diamond necklace, but the piece of jewelry everyone in the room noticed was the heavy, raw black diamond resting on her left hand. She wasn't just the wife of the capo. She was the heart of the Russo family. And as Adrian leaned over to kiss her neck, ignoring the stares of the room, everyone knew one undeniable truth. The coldest boss in New York hadn't just been tamed, he had been conquered. Did you expect this fierce waitress to melt the icy heart of New York's most dangerous mafia boss? If Beatrice's incredible journey from struggling to survive to ruling the Russo Empire kept you on the edge of your seat, we want to hear from you. Hit that like button. Share this story with your friends who love a spicy, dramatic romance. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more thrilling, real-life inspired tales. Drop a comment below.